Thank you very much, Jessica. Thanks everyone for joining us. Either good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and when you might be watching this. So we do appreciate you spending a little bit of time. Less Software is an independent software vendor that makes supply chain management applications that are delivered as a service, as software as a service in a subscription model. And a big part of what we do is help firms manage their spend with their suppliers. And so today we're really going to focus on that as opposed to warehouse operations or order fulfillment or some of the other aspects of supply chain. So that's really kind of where we're going to focus today. So from a process point of view, our customers are typically buying not only goods, but they're buying services. And from office supplies to capital equipment to contractors to everyone who needs something. So we are looking for trying to manage all of that and get all of that spend in under control. So typically customers are requisitioning goods and services from the procurement department, so through their manager. So if at Less Software I need a new laptop or something like that, then I request that from my manager that gets approved. So in the business process, I will create a requisition or multiple, and I will submit those to a management group, and depending on what I'm buying, that management approval cycle could very much change, right? So if I want a laptop, that's a different approval process than if I just need some office supplies. Or if I'm looking for perhaps inventory replenishment, then that has a whole different approval process. If I'm looking for capital equipment, maybe that has yet another approval process. So these approval processes can be verbose, they can be multi-tiered, they can be done in parallel, they can be done in series. So there's lots of complicated ways that spend gets approved, certainly. So we have an electronic approval process, so we're going to be kind of seeing that today. But I think where we have put some thought process into this, into a process where we call it auto PO placement. And what it really does is looks for approved spend and tries to find the appropriate source for the procurement agent. So these are previously negotiated agreements, and we're trying to source against those. And then if I don't have one of those, certainly I want to source the marketplace, get the supplier or suppliers to provide what my requisition are needed. They ship them, system receives them, and then we need to do some sort of a vouchering process on the process to do an accounts payable. Now, we're certainly not an accounting system, but we work with a great company called Financial Force that has a great accounts payable system to be able to pay suppliers and electronic fund transfers and through check runs and everything else like that. But you can replace that with your system. Could be SAP, could be Oracle, could be QuickBooks. But we certainly do like the good folks at Financial Force, and we'll see them today. So that's kind of what we thought we would kind of go through here today. So it's really about trying to get the spend of the company into a contracted agreement and try to stop that contract leakage is really kind of what we're going to be kind of focusing on today. So we're going to take a look at the application here, and today I'm working on a Mac, and I have a profile here that allows me to contribute to the business, or tells me how I can contribute to the business. So today, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working as kind of a full-use user. I can literally do everything, but that's probably not really going to happen in the real world. So my screen is, I happen to be using a Mac today. I have a browser, and that's really all that I really need to be able to manipulate the application. So our customers aren't buying hardware, software, database products. We're managing all of that complexity. So all I really need is a browser. I am logged in, and it gives me a full view of all of the application tabs that I can do. So one of the things that, or a couple of things that we found that are really, really powerful that our customers like is having the ability to be able to work through certain things from an exception basis. So the application provides some dashboarding and reporting capabilities to say, so in this case, I'm looking at my supplier management database and I'm seeing, I've got purchase orders by projects, so I can see what other projects are going. I've got purchase orders by supplier. I've got purchase orders by type of spend, or you might think of this as a commodity code. So I'm buying capital equipment and contract manufacturing and contractor hours and descriptions and freight charges and items and services. But you can obviously, where I'm spending my money is in this particular area. So nice, I can see a kind of a list of my suppliers and their on-time performance. So I can kind of see that. My capital require or my cash requirement spend going out over time. So I can have as many of these dashboards as I care to have, and they're just kind of like one click away from pretty good information. So we'll come back to reporting in a little bit. So if I was looking for something, I just wanted to try to find some data, and somebody said, hey, Mike, who helps us with injected molding parts or plastic parts or something like that? Do you know who that supplier is? And it sounds like a pretty easy question, and if I may know, all of my suppliers really, really well, but if I'm new to the organization, we have this search bar that's really kind of helpful. So if I start to type in the word plastic, because that's I'm just trying to find anything that might help me with that search. It'll go through in search, and what it found for me was a supplier site. This supplier apparently makes an injected molded plastic parts. So, how do we categorize people? How do we understand these suppliers? So these suppliers, this whole list of suppliers that we have inside the database here, gives us this access to all of this information. So today we'll take a look at ABC Corporation here, and who are they? Who's their parent? Are they, are we dealing with the headquarters? Are we dealing with the division, so that we can roll up that spend? As we start to make these strategic agreements with people, we want to be able to understand the total spend with an organization. So, there's lots of companies within companies kind of thing. We want to do that. How do I communicate with them? How do I send them a purchase order? Is it email? Do I send it out via EDI, phone, mail? How do I deliver content to this particular supplier in terms of sourcing events, which would be like requests for quotes, proposals, information, things like that? Do they have insurance? When does that expire? Where are they? Where were they physically? That's nice information to have. How do I trade with them? Do I trade with them in what currency do I trade with them? In other words, do I buy in euros from them and I receive in dollars? Do I need to do something like that? Terms, conditions, freight, basic classifications. This particular supplier now does have a master agreement in place, so we're going to kind of focus on that, and they have a negotiated price list for our product. So that's something we're going to want to concentrate on. The capability listing, who are they? Do they have any certifications? What industry? What SIC code, CAGE code, small business designation? So, if our customers have to fill out a standard form 294, 295 for the SBA, it's great to be able to designate and understand the spend from that way, another way of thinking about it. And then this is everything I kind of know about what's going on with this supplier, like who is it that I know at DC? Think of this as maybe the Rolodex. These are my negotiated agreements with this supplier. That's great. We're definitely going to work on that. Any notes, attachments, current activities that I have scheduled with them. I have a meeting coming up in a few days here. Should have done a credit check. That's past due. I have some activity history where I've been on site. I've done some follow-up calls. And then these are all the purchase orders that I've spent or placed with them. So it's pretty easy to get a really quick look at things. So this agreement, though, is really where we want to focus some attention today. So I have a catalog from them, from ABC Corporation, and that has many, many products on it. And when I look at products, I can go through, and really what the application is trying to do here is to say, hey, when I buy this widget from ABC Corporation, this is the standard list price that they're offering me. And what I've done is I've negotiated a price through the end of 2012 through a quantity of 500. I'm going to pay this much. So this is kind of like how much I actually am going to place a PO for against this. So I've negotiated this agreement through some kind of a request for information and negotiation and spend analysis, and I've been able to negotiate this price for me. So that's great. I know it. I negotiated it. That's all done. Now, how do I share this amongst the organization? So we're going to focus on this because I've negotiated a great price, but how do I share that with my colleagues in the organization? So let's try and buy some of these widgets and see what the application might do for us. So starts with perhaps a requisition. I am a requisitioner, and let's say I need these widgets in inventory planning, and I need them to be shipped to my finished goods warehouse in Los Angeles, and I am going to trade with them, you know, different currencies, but I'll trade with them in US dollars. So I'm going to set this requisition up to say, you know, what is it that I want to buy? In other words, what is the kind of thing that I'm trying to buy? Am I buying capital equipment here that could work into a fixed asset and depreciation schedule, a contractor's hours, and then terms of that, or maybe just a general description. Like I want a contractor to come in and paint the building, so I don't want to set up an item SKU or something crazy like that to be able to understand that kind of spend. I'm buying a service, or I'm buying from a catalog, like a punch out to maybe a Granger or something like that. But we'll buy a simple item for inventory replenishment and kind of see how this might work. So I want to buy some of those widgets that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and I want to buy them in a condition. So the application is allowing me to saying, like, you know, you would never pay the same amount for something that's used versus new. So the system's very sensitive to this. So I'll say, yeah, I want to buy new product, and I would like to buy, you know, 5 of these, and I would like them by the end of next week. That's terrific. So I can, at this point, suggest a supplier to the procurement agent where I think they could get them. If something wasn't already set up in the system, I could say, here, just create this new number for me and deal with it that way. I may want to set a budget for them, you know, say, I think this spend is going to be, let's say it's about $5,000 worth of widgets that I'm doing here. I may want to charge them either to an internal charge number or GL account or departmental charge code. I may want to charge them or associate them with a government contract if I'm a government contractor, I'm working on their behalf. So interesting base information here. So I saved that, so I could have as many line items as I care to have on a requisition. There's lots of different ways to kind of put requisitions in, but I have a requisition now, and it needs to be submitted to my manager. So I've created it at a certain date and time, and I own this. So based on who I report to in the organization, I'm going to submit for approval this requisition. So the system goes through and says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and submit that for approval, and because of the total requisition value of $5,000 that I'm requesting to spend, I'm submitting this to my boss, and Jessica needs to approve this. So, well, what does Jessica do? So Jessica gets either an email that she can approve. She can approve it within the application. She can approve it on her smartphone, on her iPad, however she is dealing with the information system today. So the system does extend out to mobile devices. So what she's, at the end of the day, what she's going to do is look at this requisition and say, okay, it's for inventory planning. Mike needs this inventory grade. So she'll say, yep, okay, that's good to go, and type that, or type any kind of a message with or without comment, and she can either approve or reject or kind of cancel this transaction. So if she rejects it, it comes back to me, and she may have written a note in there and said, I don't think we need $5,000 worth of these widgets. Why don't we buy at this time, you know, $2,500 worth of these widgets? So it's a way for us to communicate without us having to do what I call sneaker net, run up and down the hallways or get on the phone or get on email. We're just doing this within the system. So she's going to go ahead and approve this transaction for us. So with this management overview of the history, now we see where I submitted it, and then Jessica's come in and approved it with a comment. So I now have approved spend. So what happens to approved spend inside the system is we look for approved spend and says, is there a company out there that I have a negotiated agreement with to place this purchase order? So in fact, in this case, there is, because we saw that agreement with ABC Corporation. So here they are. It took our requisition line and placed a purchase orders. So based on that price that I had negotiated, based on the condition code, the period of performance, and the unit, it selected the correct unit cost for me. Now in this case, we're actually, no pun intended here, I'm actually buying cases. So the supplier unit of measure is cases, and when I receive it, I'm going to transfer cases to eaches. So there may be 12 widgets in a case, and so when I receive one case, I receive a dozen pieces. So the application's kind of good around that. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, this purchase order is currently in an unapproved status. So what the system's done is built the entire purchase order for me and associated this. So I placed the purchase order, but I placed it against the buyer agreement, the supplier agreement, based on previously negotiated. So in this case, the players that have been here is that I requisitioned it, I placed the purchase order, Jessica has approved it, and Diane McRoby is the buyer who is responsible for this person. So this previously negotiated agreement has been leveraged here, and I didn't have to know anything about it other than I needed to get spend approved. So if that's done, we can put in some very basic payment terms, as you probably would expect. These can be defaulted from the supplier agreement if we have to do that. And I'm ready to go. So I'm going to call up ABC Corporation and talk to that contact, that person that I know there, and talk to them about where this product needs to go, or any kind of anything, or just place my purchase order. So when I'm done, so I can confirm it, and let's say I called up and I confirmed it with Mark, and he's got the order and he's got it and he's accepting our purchase order. So that's great. So I'm going to submit this order for internal approvals, and based on the total value of the PO, I'm good to go. I don't need anything. That purchase order is now approved. I've told them how I want the shipment to be done, the most economical. Certainly could change that. And then when I want to send a purchase order to ABC Corporation, we're going back and reading that agreement, saying, how do I send it to them? Do I EDI it? Do I mail it? Do I email it? Do I phone place the order? And how does that get done? So when I say send it, it looks at all of that. And in this case, the delivery option is email, and that email has now been delivered out to ABC Corporation, and the purchase order is now attached here so we can see what they see. So this is so what does a purchase order look like? There's really no right or wrong answer. Every one of our customers has their own format they use to generate a rendering of the contract. So what is the shipping method, the terms, who I confirmed it with, all of that information we talked about, and then we brand these for our customers, and they get them in PDF format to be able to deliver to their customers in an on-demand model. So lots of different ways to deliver, obviously, purchase orders. So I have a purchase order. That's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But I think the key thing is that in this case, this supplier agreement really did get leveraged. I didn't have to do a bunch of work to place this PO. I just had to approve spend. And at the end of the day, we think a lean organization that negotiates fair agreements with their suppliers, can leverage a system like this and do it quite well. So that's kind of our basic supplier agreement, kind of the way that works. So we'll wonder, if I don't have a supplier agreement, how is that going to work? How do I source and use the system to help me find sources? So the system, as you might expect, will have as part of the system to go out and do solicitations, get requests for information or proposals, or in this case we're dealing with a request for a quote. We'll have some kind of when I'm doing it, how do I want it shipped? Where do I want that particular product shipped to? I want to go to my distribution center in Los Angeles, so they get all the information that the supplier needs about when and what I'm doing. So these, in this case, what I'm buying, I'm trying to buy an antenna and an antenna harness. The system will help me source the requirements based on any agreements that I may have, any history that I may have around this particular item. So I can source the requirements by going through here and saying, okay, look through the history that I've done and who do I do trade with to buy these. So I have a couple of different firms that I can buy these products from. If I want to include them in this request for quote, then I just select the suppliers that I want to choose, select request for quote, and what we end up with is a couple of requests for quotes going out to our supplier base. So we're going to quote these guys. And again, what is the preferred communication for now sourcing events, right? Our RFPs, RFI, do I email them? Do I EDI them? How do I do that? So we'll go ahead and deliver those, and then after a period of time, they'll respond to that. So how can they respond? Well, they could respond by responding, in this case, to my email, and I will parse that out and put that data back inside the system so that I can evaluate it. We may give certain suppliers access to the system in terms of a supplier portal. They may come back and say, yes, I got your request for bid. Here's my response in terms of pricing and delivery and any other information that they may want to give me. So that that can be done that way, and then certainly, they get, depending on the level of interaction with that supplier, you may just get a phone call back, and we're going to go ahead and do it. So after those responses get back in, or we hit that response cutoff date, then I'm going to say, okay, let's evaluate these responses that I've gotten from the supplier base and say, okay, I see that we've got two bidders on these two different products. I've got a $69 price for this product antenna harness, and I got a little bit cheaper price. That's good. 10 days delivery after order for my product, that exact product I'm looking for. That all looks pretty good. And then on the other product, again, this supplier is a little cheaper than this supplier. So you know what? The deliveries within what I need to do, they are established and approved suppliers, so I don't have to, because I certainly could be requesting pricing information from unestablished suppliers. So I don't have any extra work to be able to place that. So I'm just going to pick, in this case, based on a competitive bid. It looks like I got good delivery terms, everything that seems to be competitive within a range that would define competition. So I'll say, you know what, I'll take those two bids and I'll create a purchase order from them. So in this case, what we've done is we've placed a PO for a couple of different lines, pulled the pricing data out of the request for quote and the supplier's response. But rather than buying on agreement here, my award code is going to be a little bit different now. So now I'm going to say, I really did competitively bid this. So it could have been a directed source. I may have been strategically trying to develop a new supplier. It may have been a quality issue, or they had product availability immediately and I needed that. So it helps me, as a procurement professional, say, okay, that's competitively bid, and so I know that I got good current market day pricing on this product. So, I placed this order. I'm quite happy with that, and I'll go through and submit it for approval and create terms and everything that we had kind of previously discussed. But now the power of this award code becomes really good, because now I can analyze my spend based on that, and our customers are creating these award codes. These are samples that we're using to kind of have our discussion today. But you can see now I've spent money on contract. I've spent money with a competitive bid. So you can see how this kind of grows out to be a pretty powerful piece of the system. The total spend is $23,000. That's much more than our last one. So right now, our purchase order is been submitted for approval for spend. So just like we saw in the requisition, now I put approvals on the actual spend, because this is commitment of funds. So it's pretty easy to approve these things. We've seen this before. They say, yep, that's okay, I like that, and I'll go ahead and approve that. So you get this nice history tracking of everything that's kind of gone on. So wonder if I was looking at a purchase order and I wanted to kind of look at this data a little bit differently. So we could go in and say, let's say, I did place that purchase order a little while ago with ABC Corporation. They called me up and they want to be able to change, this date. So, they had made a commitment date of 10/17, but now they're telling me they've got a little bit of a problem. So I want to, help them out here a little bit. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to change this date, right, from 10/17. They're saying it's now 10. Let's say they're going to make it 10/24, right? And I'll save that. So now what the system is saying, okay, now I've got a commitment date of 10/17 and a promise date of 10/24. So that's what I do. The supplier rating on, but this is operationally when everybody thinks they're going to get the product. So this is, powerful information in its own right. The system tracks every time that I make a change. So in this case, I created the purchase order, and then a few minutes later, about 10 minutes later, I changed the current promise date from 10/17 to 10/24. So this is what we call field level tracking. So I got a really good feeling about what's going on with this purchase order. I've got all of the history of who's changed what, all of the interactions with not only suppliers, but down to the specific purchase order line item and delivery date and price information, and I can collect notes and everything about that. So this is a kind of a complete way of looking at things. So we like the power of being able to document the system without having to do a whole bunch of work and add notes. Typically, in my past history, if I change the supplier date, I have to write a note about what it was and what it is now. Really don't have to do that. The system's kind of self-documenting for me, or this concept of self-documentation that we like. So great. So I've placed my POs, I've sourced them, it's all great. Now I really want to just do a simple receipt so I can get these products received. So when we do a purchase order receipt, so if you think about it now, I'm actually out on a receiving dock. I open the box, I find the pack slip, and I start typing in the purchase order number that I see on the pack slip. The system will find it for me, and I'll create a receipt. This is kind of important here because I've ordered 5 cases, and I want to be able to receive those 5. So what we're asking this user is say, did you receive the 5 that I had ordered, or is it a partial receipt, or is there something wrong here? And say, he counts them, and he says, yeah, there's 5 of them. I'm going to go ahead and save those. So now what the system is saying is, wow, this particular item is under lot number control. And do I want to barcode in a lot number, or have the system just kind of automatically assign it for me? So I'll say, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So I can, at this point in time, from a procurement point of view, we've received the product, we've put it there, we've got a specific receipt against that inventory. At this point, this user could attach any document. So I may want to attach a scanning of that receiving document. If there's a material safety data sheet or some other kind of document that's involved in this process that I want to attach to this receipt so it can be recalled by the system, you can scan them in and attach them to the document. So I've got a product, I've got it received, and now I'm going to get a voucher or a supplier invoice. So I'm going to voucher that. And it sounds kind of funny that we would do this because, we're not really an accounting system as we kind of started today. But to really understand how the supplier is performing it's from a perfect order performance from the supplier. I'm hoping that my bill matches my purchase order contract. So we kind of think that we need to really own this. So I'm going to open up an invoice, and I'm going to type in the supplier's invoice number and the date that I received it against what my purchase order is. So I'm going to receive it against my purchase order, and I'll go ahead and save that. And so what the system's trying to help me do now, because I placed the PO and I received the products, I should be able and it was delivered to my warehouse, I should be able to match the invoice with the PO with the receipt, or what we call simply a 3-way match. So yeah, I bought those widgets. I bought 5 of them. I received 5 of them. My PO unit cost was $49.31. Is that what's on the invoice in my hand? If it is, then in fact we have a 3-way match. If not, their invoice does not match my purchase order, and I should take exception to it. So they did everything right, except the invoice wasn't right. And so that's not good. So we want to make sure that we're kind of checking these things. So we do that. At this point in time, then I in fact have a match. So everything about this supplier invoice has been vetted. We've run the receipt against the invoice and the PO price. We're happy with everything that's kind of gone on inside of the system. So I in fact have a match of this transaction. So I've received it, I've matched it. literally everything's done now. So at this point in time, what we do is we pull this invoice data and create a payables invoice in our customer's finance system so that they can do electronic fund transfer or however they're going to pay their supplier, check runs, those sorts of things. So we like to make that kind of efficient. So it's automatically created a payable invoice for our account over in our finance system. We're done. When I look at this purchase order now, we can start to really kind of understand what's gone on. The purchase order from a status point of view is now closed because all items have been received. So the quantity ordered equals the quantity received. They've met the commitment date. I can see that the PO is in fact vouchered and matched and not yet paid, but it is in fact done. So I can see all of this going back to our purchase order. So kind of that's a couple of different ways that we're thinking about spend. So kind of in going back to what we learned, right? So a supplier relationship, a supplier relationship that you have, if they're approved and currently active, what we're recommending and really trying to recommend is how you do business with them. How do you do trade in terms of, do you have this supplier agreement in place and can you leverage it in your spend control? Being able to classify people effectively so that if you're looking for a process manufacturer and you were able to just quickly search for that in a search place, you'd be able to find what we were looking for. So, all of the search criteria is available to every user based on their security profile. So, that's kind of some of the key concepts we wanted to get across to you today. So when we kind of think about this from a way to do this, so we have customers that do things that are very, very project specific. There's a level of automation that goes on with these things. You can manage your direct and indirect spend, so it's a total spend management as opposed to just having multiple systems to manage spend. We don't like that. The increased efficiency with electronic approvals and understanding the business policy and making sure that you are compliant within your own policies is there. And this really, as you start to measure your suppliers, your internal approval processes, your internal performances, you can leverage this into continuous improvements, understand and analyze the spend to be able to determine where you should have supplier agreements if you don't today, if you're just doing a lot of transactions. So interesting way to think about that. So with that, that's kind of some of the concepts that we wanted to get across today. We may have had some questions. I know we provided a chat window to ask questions. So Jessica, did we get a couple of questions that maybe I can answer I missed?
We did get a couple questions. One of them is about the approvals, and they're wondering how are the approvals set up? Who assigns who's going to approve what? Is that something? Oh, go ahead.
So the approval process is set up within the system, and it's based on a concept that we call a role. So I may be a procurement agent, and I have spend authority up to, let's say, $5,000. After that, based on my role, it needs to go to the next approving manager who can approve, something over $5,000. So where this starts to get really interesting is on what we call the color of money. Am I buying, in other words, capital equipment or replenishment inventory? So that gets to that. So it's set up inside the system. It's not an external application. It's a point and click kind of a thing to create essentially a Visio diagram of my workflow and approvals. This is something that our customers' system administrators do with a little bit of training. Certainly don't have to call us software to do that. So I would say every customer has a unique approval process, so we have to make that pretty flexible. So that's a very fair question.
Okay. The next question is, does the system retain the actual cost from the purchase order?
Right. That's good. So we've seen systems where they will average costs across perhaps inventory. We have taken a pretty hard stance here. We're saying, a purchase order cost is purchase order cost, and we're not changing that, and we don't change it in inventory. So we could buy the same product 3 different times at 3 different prices, and the system will retain them each in their own individual pricing.
Okay. And the last question I think we touched on just briefly, it's this individual purchases goods from different countries, so does the system handle multiple currencies?
Yeah, fair question. So multiple currencies, right? So I can buy in any currency, and the system will allow me to, at the supplier level, pick that currency, or at the purchase order level, pick that currency. In other words, what we're saying is I may buy from this particular supplier in euros this time, but next time they want to do trade in US dollars or something like that. So, British pounds to euros, euros to there, all of the multi-currencies. You simply turn on the currencies that you want to trade in is the only prerequisite, and then set the exchange rates up, and you're off and running. So, yeah, fair enough. It is a global economy now. So.
And that was actually all the questions that we had today.
Okay, great. So really what we're trying to establish as a company is some kind of value that you can look at that is quantifiable in a couple of different ways. First, that you have an efficient way of buying goods and services, that you can consolidate your business processes down, create a level of automation, make it less dependent on people to know everything about everything. Where I have that strategic agreement, the system knows that and should be able to help you with that. And we're really big on this contract leakage concept of, utilize the workflows and approvals to leverage those agreements so that you can really negotiate powerfully with your suppliers to get the best possible markets spend that you can. And just from a value point of view, because our applications are delivered in a subscription model and are 100% cloud-based, there's nothing that you need to buy to start. So I know in the past I've worked at firms where we had to buy multiple servers and database products and firewall products and backup products, and after all of that, then you could start working on your spend management. This is something our customers can start with, working on their spend management on day one. You get a login, a URL, and you start working. So that speed is important to us. So we like that quantifiable value. And so, kind of in summary, we have written a white paper about spend management and some of the concepts that you saw today and why we think they're important. So if you're interested in that, you can certainly contact us. Our Director of Sales is Caroline Pomeroy, and she can be reached toll-free at 866-603-1454, or you can contact her directly at caroline.pomeroy@lesssoftware.com, or please visit us online at www.lesssoftware.com, and we'll be happy to, you can learn more about what we're doing there. So I guess, from our perspective, we wanted to thank you today for joining us, taking a little bit of time out of your day to find out kind of what we're doing and how we might help you. If there's anything that you'd like to discuss, something you heard today or you didn't hear today that you wonder about, feel free to reach out for us. And Jessica, thanks very much for getting us all together today.